Right, so ready?
Yep, we are live. So I'll
Okay,
hand it over to you,
great.
Madam Chair.
Okay, welcome to the Housing Commission's May 5th regular meeting, 2021. This is a teleconference meeting with Housing Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. So I will call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. Welcome, Lauren. And I would like to quickly acknowledge that we are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone territory, unless some of us are calling in from far away, which is possible, but that is where I am. And I want to introduce the staff and Housing Commission members who are present. Housing Commissioner Lauren Bigelow, myself, Karen Grove, the chair, and Rachel Horst, the vice chair, Wendy McPherson, Nevada Merriman, and John Pimentel. And while I'm doing this, and absent today is Curtis Conroy, I want to acknowledge Wendy because this is her last meeting, and Kurt in absentia. Well, actually, do I know that about Kurt? I don't know that about Kurt. He may reapply at the end of his term. I do know that about Wendy, and I want to just acknowledge how really great it's been to have Wendy on the commission. Sometimes she and I have disagreed on issues, and I even enjoy having her on the commission when we disagree because she's really clear and communicative and respectful and collaborative even when disagreeing. So really, really will miss you, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
So then also present are Deputy Community Development Director Rhonda Kaufman and Management Analyst 2 Mike Noche and Contract Principal Planner Payal Bhagat. So Housing Staff Member Mike Noche, would you please provide instructions to the Housing Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. And welcome to everyone in attendance this evening to the May 5th meeting of the Housing Commission. At this time, we ask that members of the Housing Commission please remain on the screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own cameras and microphones. Staff will engage cameras and microphones to make presentations and to respond to members of the Housing Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature or via telephone, press *9 to raise your hand to speak. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And that includes my instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, so under public comment, the public may address the Housing Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the Housing Commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The Housing Commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the Housing Commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Mike, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just as a reminder for anyone who just joined, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature or *9 if you're calling in. I will then have the ability to open your microphone. And at this time, I am not seeing any hands raised, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. So under regular business, the Housing Commission receives informational presentations in addition to considering policy matters and administrative actions. Are there any clarifying questions from the Housing Commission on item D1, which is to approve the minutes from the Housing Commission meeting of March 3rd, 2021, before we take public comment on that item? Seeing none, Mike, do we have any public comment on item D1?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And not to be redundant, but if there are any public comments, please engage the raised hand feature now. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And I do not see any hand raised, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, let's see, this item is open for Housing Commission discussion. Does anyone have anything to say about the minutes, or would anyone like to make a motion to approve them?
Sure, I motion to approve them.
Okay, so Lauren moves to approve. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second.
Okay, Rachel and John. I heard Rachel first. Okay, then I would like to do a roll call vote for nays and abstentions. Anybody who votes no on approving the minutes? Seeing none. Anyone who abstains? Seeing none, I will say that it passes unanimously. And we'll move on to item E2, which is a recommendation of a below market rate housing agreement term sheet with Greystar for the Menlo Portal project. So contract principal planner Payal Bhagat will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the Commission and members of the community. If you can just give me a second, I will share my screen and start my presentation. Before I start, I just wanted to confirm that you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry, just give me a second here.
Yes, now we can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So the project before you this evening is to discuss and provide a recommendation on the below market rate term sheet for the project called Menlo Portal. Before I start my presentation, I wanted to make a correction for the staff report and reflect in the record that the Planning Commission will be the final decision-making or approving body for this project. The Planning Commission will certify the environmental document and approve the BMR housing agreement. The City Council will only look at utilities that they are requesting an amendment for, and in case there is an appeal for the project, or if the Council calls up the project for review. Only in those scenarios, the City Council will be reviewing the project. So the project is located at 115 Independence Drive, 104 and 1010 Constitution Drive. The project site is located south of the Bay Front Expressway and east of Marsh Road. The project site consists of 3 parcels, which the project is proposing to consolidate and subdivide, creating 2 parcels. One of the parcels will house the 335 apartment rental units, and the other parcel will receive the 34,868 square feet office building and the community amenities for the project. The applicant is proposing to use the bonus level provision of the zoning code for this project, and which allows them to develop the site at 100 dwelling units to an acre. The project site is 3.2 acres roughly, so that will yield 320 units. And 15% of those units, or 48 units, would be inclusionary for our zoning requirements. The project is also proposing additional 15 market rate units for the city's BMR housing program, bringing the total number of units on site at 335. The applicant is proposing two scenarios for the BMR units included in the project. The first scenario is the all low income scenario, where majority of the bedrooms would be either junior bedroom or studio and one bedroom unit. The second scenario is a mixed unit scenario. This scenario provides about 65% of the units at moderate income level. For these reasons, staff is recommending that the Housing Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission for a low-income scenario rather than the mixed scenario. We find that the mixed scenario yields a lot of moderate units and doesn't appropriately service the city's population and needs. The units are distributed throughout the site, and the size is comparable to those offered at market rate. With that, I conclude my brief presentation. The applicant, Andrew Marcos, is present and will provide the commission with their presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Andrew.
Good evening, Housing Commissioners. Thank you for having me. Let me just get my screen up. All right. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Andrew Morcos, and I am the Senior Development Director for Greystar in Menlo Park. We're here today to talk about our second project in the Bayside area under the Connect Menlo plan. It's called Menlo Portal. And Menlo Portal consists of 335 rental apartment units, and adjacent is 35,000 square feet of commercial office space. Just to note on kind of where we are in the entitlement process, the draft EIR was released on February 25th, and the 45-day public comment review period closed on April 14th. And so the response to comments will be presented to Planning Commission for approval, hopefully in the next month or so. So we're here primarily to discuss the affordable housing units, the BMR units on site. We have 48 units that will be incorporated into this project. It's 15% of the 320 that are allowed through the density bonus zoning. And those contribute to Menlo Park's RHNA BMR allocation totaling 1,735 housing units from 2023 to 2031. So as far as our community outreach, we have been doing outreach in primarily Belhaven, but throughout Menlo Park since 2019. We've had 3 community meetings at the Menlo Park Senior Center, the Netta Harris Senior Center, and Belhaven. We distributed 6,000 plus postcards in English and Spanish to Belhaven, East Palo Alto, and other neighboring communities to the site. We've had over 50 one-on-one phone calls with community members, and we prepared a BMR overview brochure because a lot of the applicants, or rather than applicants, a lot of the people that were coming to our community events were interested in BMRs. And we found that there wasn't a good resource for them to understand the city's BMR requirements or where they could sign up. And so we worked with Rhonda to prepare a brochure and help distribute that to the community. How does this shape our BMR program? So obviously a lot of the people that came were interested in renting BMRs. We were unfortunately unable to, have the units ready for them, but we're able to share the resources that are available through Menlo Park. And so we've provided the zoning requirement, which is 48 on-site BMR units. And we've provided two alternatives based on Housing Commission and the city's feedback. One option is all low income BMR mix. And the second option is what's called an equivalent alternative in the code, which incorporates a mix of income levels that average to low. So just a little bit more about the BMR proposal overview. The BMR units will be 100% compliant with the city's BMR guidelines. They are the same proportionate size as the market rate units, and they're indistinguishable from the market rate units. And they're inclusive and available to special needs populations. They are primarily, as the Housing Commission surely knows, to those who live in Menlo Park, those who work in Menlo Park, or those who were displaced in 2008. Our team is looking forward to cooperating with the city on an ongoing basis. We feel we have a best-in-class affordable team in our organization to facilitate, getting people who need these homes in them as quickly as possible. So the BMR mix will mirror the overall breakdown for the project. And I want to touch on just the two alternatives a little bit further in detail. Alternative one is stated as all low income units, so 48 low income units. Alternative two was established by understanding how an equivalent alternative is defined, which is to say that the average subsidy needs to be the same for alternative one as it does for alternative two. And so you'll notice that it skews heavily towards moderate income units. And the reason why it skews is because there's a 75% cap on what can be charged to moderate income units. And this is similar to what I had presented in the last meeting, which it's problematic for the alternative equivalent because in order to achieve the same subsidy, you have to heavily weight the moderate income units because they get capped at 75%. So you end up subsidizing a lot more for moderate income units. This plan just shows a sample site plan showing that the units will be distributed throughout the project and indistinguishable from the market rate units. And although this meeting focuses on the affordable housing and BMR units, we're really excited about our community amenity in the project, which we have focused on education improvements specific to Belhaven and specifically early education improvements. So our 8.6 million community amenity value will go towards 3,790 square feet of space for an educational facility for 3 to 5 year olds, which will house, basically daycare, early education opportunities for 20 to 24 children. And we have identified All Five, which is a existing Belhaven-based nonprofit and provider of early childhood education, who has a strong history in the Belhaven area and who provides heavy subsidies to the Belhaven community and other low-income communities to provide childcare. One of the great things about All Five is that 50% of the enrollment is free for the applicant or for the child. The additional 25% is heavily subsidized on a scaling basis, and the remaining 25% is at market rate for childcare. And one of the interesting things I learned is that the reason that All Five does that is that it ensures that they're providing equitable level of service to their children as a full market rate childcare facility. So childcare in Belhaven is a significant need. Over 40% of families are in need of childcare and don't have it. It prevents families from being able to work regular schedules, and it primarily impacts women and women of color. So we're really excited about this community benefit, and hope the community or the Housing Commission is too. A little bit more on the proposed community amenity. It's located in the office portion of our project. It's on the corner. It has 1,600 square feet of interior space, and has over 2,000 square feet of outdoor play space. It's shielded from the street and is facing the interior public paseo. And so this area faces the residential building, and it'll be a very welcoming and integrated design, which we heard from Planning Commission was important to them. So lastly, our project has been endorsed by Housing Leadership Council, by the Bay Area Council, and Silicon Valley Leadership Group. As always, we're open to feedback, open to having meetings, open to one-on-one conversations. Please feel free to reach out to me directly at amorcos@greystar.com. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So are there any clarifying questions from commissioners before we go to public comment? Lauren.
As no surprise to anyone. My one question was, when we last spoke, first of all, thank you for the breakout of the two different scenarios. But my question was, we talked a little bit about income and what you guys would consider qualifying income when you were last here. And we talked about whether or not you would be willing to work with that, because I think that one of the things that we're going to see is with potentially 31 moderate units, you may see people with lower incomes who are willing to pay more. And while that isn't technically affordable, it is a real world situation.
Mm-hmm.
Were you willing to work on that?
Yeah, so the industry standard is around 2.5 times. And I know that Mid-Penn in Nevada, please correct me if I'm wrong, is a 2 times threshold, and Greystar is comfortable going with that level as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Other clarifying questions? I'll ask one, which is, is that only for moderate income units, or would that 2x factor be something you're comfortable with for the low income units?
It's
as
across
well?
the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. And last call for clarifying questions, and seeing none. Mike Noche, are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature. If you're calling in, you can push *9. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And it does look like we have one hand raised, and it looks like it's a call-in, so I don't have a name, but please state your name and you should be able to address the commission.
Good evening. This is Pamela Jones, resident of Menlo Park. Wendy, it has been a joy seeing your work on the commission, and I hope they replace you with someone that is very close to you. You added a lot of dynamics that were really, really, really important. Quick question here. It's a new one. And that is, what elementary school district will the students be attending? From what I looked at on the map, some will be going to Ravenswood School District, others will be going to Redwood City School District. So that leads me to a second question. How will these students get to their schools safely? And so now I can bring up once again the need to build that bridge for all of you developers, putting your money in a pot, build that bridge from all of your developments over to the Menlo Park Community Center. So that's the end of my question and comment.
Thank you, Pam. And just as a reminder for members of the public, if you'd like to address the commission, please use the raise hand feature now. And I do not see any other hands raised, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, great. Commissioners, thoughts, discussion? I open the floor. Rachel's finger is up. She must have a small comment.
This is not pivotal to the development, but just for staff. I was looking at the term sheet draft and under the fourth, I don't know what that is, recital maybe, which is on page attachment A, the first page. It says, it explains that what the maximum density is, that the project included up to 48 additional market rate units, but they chose to include 15 market rate units. And so that results in a development of 335 units total. But then it kind of goes on to say development of 335 new residential units resulting in inclusionary housing units. So it just kind of, is that it's probably a typo, right? I just wanted to call that out. I understand it's a draft. It's not, it's a very important part of the term sheet because it explains why the development has additional market rate units. And you know, it has the numbers in there. So, you know, it kind of codifies that requirement. So I just wanted to call that out.
Rhonda, is that clear? Is that, or no, Pyle, sorry, not wrong staff person.
I can try and then Rhonda can correct me or add to it if necessary. I mean, I see your point, Commissioner Horst, and we can wordsmith it to make it very clear. Basically, I think the intent was to say that because this is a bonus level project, that it needs to include inclusionary units. I think that was the intent. But I see the confusion that you're pointing out, and we can clarify the language before it is presented to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. I don't want to be petty about it. It's just that, you know, that's the real meat of it right there. So just.
Thanks, Rachel. Anyone else? Lauren.
Oh, Nevada, did you have something first?
Oh, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. Again, real world question on these rents for your 31 moderate. Do you have examples of what those would look like?
What the rents would look like?
Yeah.
I don't have them in front of me, but I can pull them up quickly, and if you don't mind, I can get back to you.
That would be great. Thank you so much. The issue there is that if you guys are willing to accept 2 times the rent for some of these properties or some of these units, but the rent is placed at 80% only, it's not going to fully reach everybody. It'll only reach a portion of the population, but that number will be larger if you guys are willing to go at 2 times rent. So I was just curious what those numbers were. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one comment on that is that some of the moderate income rents are capped by the 75% maximum. And we haven't done the analysis of what that means in terms of incomes, but I think that will provide a wider band at 2 times than using the high end.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I think my questions are really for Rhonda, if she could come. And they're related to the attachment G. Hi, Rhonda. Thank you for including the calculations as to how you went about evaluating income and what the amount of benefit would be to the city. Can you just walk us through that a little bit more? Because I think at first glance, it seems as though with the first scenario, we're getting more public benefit than with the second scenario. And I want to make sure that myself and my fellow commissioners are tracking with what I believe the analysis is, what the conclusions of the analysis are. And then just kind of give us some context for what else is going on so that we understand how to make the decision.
I'd be happy to do that. I think, I'm not sure if it's Mike or Payal, but whomever has control of the presentation, the staff report, it would be helpful if you could pull up attachment G to the staff report, which has the comparisons and the analysis. I think that'll help us as we walk through this. It will also help.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Payal.
Yeah, I can do that. Just give me a second. I'm pulling it up right now.
There it is. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. There you go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Please let me know if we need to adjust this table. So what we do is first we take, in the first table at the top of this sheet, what you will see is the analysis of the all low income rental by the unit size in the development. So in this case, and which is the requirement under the BMR guidelines, which state that rental units, inclusionary rental units shall be low income. However, an alternative equivalent may be proposed and evaluated. So here what we do is we analyze first the low income units. So here we have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And you'll see the first column shows unit size. Second column is the area median income level, so low income, LI stands for. Market rents, that is the average market rent at the time that this project application was being reviewed. So there may be some implications and changes related to COVID, et cetera. Those weren't necessarily factored here. These were based on the market rents that came in during the housing needs analysis. The affordable rents then are calculated based on again, the area median income for San Mateo County at the time we are putting this together. And so those rents are plugged in. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. I'm just going to continue through the columns. Then the number of proposed unit at each size, an income level, and then we calculate, we do the difference, do the math. What's the difference between the market rent and the affordable rent to determine the subsidy per unit? And then we times that by the number of units and we get a total subsidy. And at the bottom, you will see the total subsidy for the 48 units is about $41,920, which averages out to about $873.33 per unit. So that's the first scenario that we run here. I'm going to go back to the 2 blocks that are highlighted in kind of light yellow for the studios and the 1 bedrooms. What those are doing is the actual maximum affordable rents based on the area median income that are permitted for those exceed 75% of the market rate rent. And so in our BMR guidelines, we have a requirement that says the affordable rents at no time can exceed 75% of market rate. So we do that adjustment here and give the developer credit for that adjustment because it essentially reduces the total rent that they can charge for that unit. So that's what those 2 items show, the 2231 affordable rent and the 2606. So that's the first analysis that we do. And then I will, if we can scroll down to the alternative proposed. So using a similar table, here we break it down by a little bit differently, where the studios, there's some being offered at very low income, which is 30% of the area median income, or I'm sorry, 50% of the area median income. Some at low income, which was up to 80% of the area median income, and some at moderate income, which are up to 120% of the area median income. So there's just some additional rows added here for each of the different income levels. Using the same analysis, we plug in the market rate rents for those size units, the maximum affordable rents, and again, the ones in kind of light yellow or light orange, depending on what this looks like on your screen, is the adjustment factor for that 75% rule. Then we have number of proposed units in each of the categories, which total 48. And then we calculate subsidy per unit, and here we get another total, which averages out in this case to 906.71 overall. It's a greater subsidy that's being provided with this alternative scenario. So that's how we run the equivalent analysis.
So it's a great, just a few questions on that. So it's a greater subsidy that's provided overall, but then when you're looking at the affordability of the units that are provided, well, it's just maybe to be blunt, the VLI units cost us a lot because we have to go up on a lot of other, we have to allow a lot of other units to float up in order to get those three. Is that consistent?
Right. So if we could scroll back up, Pale, if you wouldn't mind going back to the first table, just to want to demonstrate what Commissioner Merriman was saying. As you can see in the table, based on the unit size, well, the low incomes, there's a lower subsidy per unit required. When you get to a very low income, the rent is even lower. And so that subsidy is higher to the developer. Those are because that's only up to 50% of the AMI. So it essentially costs the developer more in the long run to provide those units at the lower income because they're getting reduced rents for a long period of, well, in perpetuity, really, for those units. So in the alternative scenarios, in order to get the average subsidy to balance, the developer has to, in order to get some very low income units, ends up having to offset that by offering a lot of moderate income units to get that higher rent to make the numbers work.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you can see that here. So
can you scroll down so we can see the full table of the second table? Thank you. Because the moderate income units don't. Sorry, go ahead, Devon. I don't need to.
Go ahead.
I was just observing that the moderate income units don't really help with reducing the subsidy if the low income rent is already capped.
So the rents on all, the affordable rents for very low income, and moderate income are all capped at 75% of market. So if the market rents move around at any time, we always look at the affordable rents and then make that adjustment. Sometimes the area median incomes, when they're published, are, I will say, is a little bit stale. Kind of a lag a year behind because they're looking at data from the last year. And so they don't really represent today's current, economy and rents and incomes. So sometimes those are out of sequence, but it's the best data that we have to use for these types of things. But in the overall scheme of things, while our RHNA, our regional housing needs allocation, from our housing element, we still have moderate income units that the city needs to produce. The reality is that oftentimes that isn't where the need is greatest right now in the community. The need is certainly great for extremely low income units, very low income units, and low income units. Sometimes the moderate income rents, with the 75% rule, it does bring the rent down. Without it, sometimes the moderate income affordable rents can equal the market rents. So our 75% rule does provide some help in that regard, but it's also a safeguard to all the other income levels the rents for those income levels.
So I think I want to, thank Mr. Morcos for hitting the brief. This is what we asked for on the last time he was before us. So I appreciate being able to see the math and how it works out. That being said, Ms. Kaufman, I think the city's BMR guidelines right now are a bit old, and they don't really allow for flexibility to deal with where we are at in our economic cycle. And that's dismaying because these rents are not affordable now. So we're in a bit of an awkward situation where I believe the developer's done what the city is consistent with the ordinances we have in place. But gosh, do I wish they had a little bit more flexibility. I know I've worked in certain cities. Our neighbor to the north, Redwood City, for instance, has a little bit more of a nuanced way of going about this so that you can get more credit for providing deeper affordability. And that's something on the Big Lot site that's with Sobrato, that's north of Woodside, that came into play. I'd love to see something like that happening here in Menlo Park for future projects, because I think this is kind of a missed opportunity to have targeting that better aligns with the need in Menlo Park, and also that's more welcoming and aligned with the neighborhood. Do you think that that is something that we could do in the future, Ms. Kaufman? Look at the constraints in our BMR program and try to build something in that would allow for more flexibility?
Sure. And I have a little experience with some of the other methods used in some of the other cities, including the one you mentioned. And I'm happy to report that later on the agenda tonight is a request for formation of an ad hoc group to work on the BMR guidelines amendments. And so this would certainly be one item, a key item in the amendments that could be looked at and considered for updating.
Is it your opinion that one of the reasons also that the VLI units are so costly but without much of an offset is because of the lack of the developer's lack of ability to access tax credits, and that there's only 3 of them? I mean, it is not this costly for them to be built through other mechanisms. Is that correct?
Yes, and definitely you're the expert on this, but absolutely, our affordable housing, mission-driven affordable housing organizations have access to public financing, including tax credits and bond financing that helps to underwrite and subsidize units at the very low income and extremely low income levels, whereas market rate developers do not have access to that kind of financing. So it is a subsidy that they bear on their own without any subsidy, public financing subsidy.
Do you see any opportunity to just align these rents more with market, Ms. Kaufman, or do you? I understand the staff report has a recommendation, but just wondering the path forward if you think that there's a way to achieve deeper affordability.
I'm not sure I totally understand that question. If we're talking specifically about this project, I think what is presented before you tonight would be the original proposal of all low income versus the alternative. And that is what we have to work with at this point, given the current BMR guidelines and ordinance. So I don't see an alternative to any adjustments to the rent any further than what we have to work with in the guidelines and ordinance.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll go. I made some notes to myself. This is just really like So first of all, I do want to say thank you to Andrew for presenting the two, and Rhonda, who worked with him, to present the two options, because that is what we asked for. And yeah, I just echo Nevada's dismay at what is before us. And just, I want to just acknowledge that it is very complicated, this whole system. And I'm so glad we have Rhonda with her years of experience working with this system, which is super convoluted. And Rhonda alluded to it, but as I, 3 years in, start to understand it, I just want to explain what I just realized to everyone else. The income levels, what we define as, well, what the county and state and HUD define as low income, very low income, and moderate income, are set using area, well, median income throughout the nation, and then adjusted to the area using different factors and different, and it's all appropriate data, but it's not just a year old, it's like 3 years old, this data. So we are basing our affordability brackets on a booming economy where high earners were getting huge raises every year, and tech companies were offering starting salaries at $500,000 a year to outcompete the other tech companies. And that pushes up the average income and the median income. So even in a wide area, countywide, and these are countywide numbers, it's not right. It's the income that is called low income is not at all low income. And then layer onto that, we have a big divide. We have sort of a dumbbell economy where some people earn very little and some people earn a lot. That affects it, makes it unfavorably. And there was one more thing that just makes it a bit, and then this affordable housing should be making up for the impact on the Belhaven neighborhood, because 8-story apartment complexes are going in right next to this community of single family homes that's been there since the 50s and even before. And there should be some compensation for that. And people who have been pushed out or are struggling to stay should have homes. But the area median income in Belhaven is way lower than the area median income in the county. And so we're not even targeting the data isn't even targeted appropriately for the problem we're trying to solve. So I just wanted to share my 3 years in aha moment on how difficult this is, because it's not really set up to work. And with that, I just wonder, to Nevada's point, is as we look at our BMR guidelines and program going forward, that we really, as Menlo Park, should be doing what we can do as a very wealthy city to address the shortcomings of the bigger system for the communities that need it. So I think that BMR ad hoc committee is going to be really important. I hope whoever signs up has got their right creative thinking caps on and is really going to center the people who most need it. And I'm totally getting off subject. I will get back on subject. I bring up my notes. Okay, so scenario 2, sorry about that digression, people. Scenario 2 achieves our low income target. So maybe this doesn't matter because we need more low income units than our RHNA requirements, but the question for staff is, what do you think about the fact that this project, if we go with all low income, but for 1 unit, will achieve our RHNA target for low income units, because we need 49, and this will provide 48. But then we still need 85 very low income or very low income plus extremely low income units and 132 moderate income units. So whatever the next project is going to have, we hope, a mix of very low, low, and moderate. And that's probably how we're going to get our very low and moderate income units. And so then, are we kind of wasting? It's just, if we feel we're going to overfill the low bucket in order to fill the VLI and moderate bucket. So Rhonda, my question to you is, how are we going to meet our very low income numbers and our moderate income numbers? Although I have to say that sometimes goals are set with good intentions and it really doesn't matter if you meet them or not. And I think the moderate income category falls into that description, but the very low doesn't. So how are we going to meet our very low income numbers and need?
Sure. So I can try to answer that as best as I can. So the RENA numbers are kind of goals in for communities to produce. And so we have to zone things and create programs to allow for the production of a certain number of housing units identified in the RENA. And with those housing units targeted at certain income levels based on the community makeup and community growth, et cetera. Currently, and this will likely change in the future, communities are not measured. I mean, we do have to report on our production within each of the income categories. It's specific. We have to report on that every year on how we're doing towards that production. But we are not measured, nor are we penalized for not producing housing within each of those income categories at this time. So in the future, there may be adjustments to from the state in housing elements and how they measure that. But currently, there isn't really, we want to try to meet those numbers as best we can, but keeping in mind that housing elements are for 8-year cycles. And so what the need was when the housing element was prepared might be different today based on differences. So we're producing units. The hardest to produce are the extremely low income and very low income units. And typically those come online through our 100% affordable housing developers, our mission-driven affordable housing organizations that access public financing like tax credit financing to produce those units. Because again, we go back to how deeply subsidized they have to be. It costs a lot to produce those units. So that's typically how those come online. We have in our pipeline a number of moderate income units either being reviewed or approved. We have low income units being reviewed or approved. We also have a nonprofit housing developer that is going to close loans soon and begin production, and will be providing a number of very low income units. And
those are counted already, right, Rhonda? The gateway, those are already counted, I think.
No, they're not counted yet in the RENA reports. No, in the APR reports we turn in each year. The APR is the annual performance report that reports out on our RENA progress. So those have not been counted in that yet.
Okay. And a follow-up question, SB 35 is a sort of a stick that relates to these numbers, but it doesn't. So SB 35 takes away control from cities to stop housing projects if they're not meeting their RENA numbers for the annual progress report, right? But that doesn't break it down by income bracket?
No.
Okay. All right. That answers that question. On like checking off the boxes, but not on meeting the community needs. All right. So I really struggle with which scenario I support, because on the one hand, helping people who are very low income is so important. I mean, these are the people who are either struggling to stay in our community, or they work in our community and probably are commuting hours each day and really want to live in our community. And so I really, really put a lot of value on the very low income units in scenario 2, even though they're expensive. They have, potentially life transforming impact for those few people. I see hands being raised now. So anyway, I'm just want to say that I'm struggling on which of these scenarios I prefer. I'd love to hear others' thoughts. Oh, sorry, I should call on someone. Lauren just put her hand down, so I assumed she was about to start talking. Or did you?
Or I am going to start talking and be muted and then unmute and start talking again. It'll be great.
Okay. Do Lauren and then Wendy and then Rachel.
Sounds good. So I ran some calculations that I think are right. I was looking at the moderate income rents on the studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And it looks to me like the moderate income units based on the 2 times income minimum threshold, those units would be they would be doable for folks that are making 50% of area median income up to 120. So those moderate units could actually be filled by lower income individuals, and then given the opportunity to grow, but their income would still pay the same rent. While there are 31 moderate units in scenario 2, it seems as though the income spectrum that they are willing to take for those rents and for the household sizes that are tied to those rents is 50% towards 120. So just
Can I quickly ask Andrew to confirm that? Or deny? Confirm or deny, Andrew?
Yeah, based on our math just done right now, it looks like for a 1 bedroom at 2606, it gets you closer to like a $60,000 income.
You've got about $62,544 minimum. And so that would be tied to a 2-person household because you do 1 bedroom plus 1. And the San Mateo County income limit for very low income is $69,600 for a household of 2. So that's above that. It's slightly under that 50%. So I just wanted to point out that we are in fact able to reach more people with this 2 times income limit than what they are said. The only thing is that these are not going to be traditionally affordable in the terms of people paying 1/3 of their income. But that is kind of par for the course for this area. A lot of people are willing to pay more to live closer to good schools and to work.
Thanks, Lauren. Are you done? Or is there more? Okay, cool. Wendy, I said I would call on you next.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. To sort of dig down in all these numbers is difficult for me to see it. All I'm looking at is sort of a bigger overview. And, the whole time I've been in the Housing Commission, it's been a little bit the Menlo Park Affordable Housing Commission. And as you realize, it's not just lower income people, it's like average and higher than average income people that can't afford to live in Menlo Park. Literally, in some areas in Menlo Park, there's 2 ways you buy a house. I'm talking about buying right now, even renting to a certain extent. But buying is you either inherit money or you have stock options, and that's it. That's it. So you have this sort of yawning medium people that if they can't get into some affordable housing, which is sort of nice and new and safe, that's being built, some of this by Greystar or Mid-Penn or whatever, they're in somewhat shabby housing. And that's, if you will, the middle class that we're going to end up losing. And Menlo Park is going to become, 2 classes of people. So I am leaning toward getting a broader swath of income satisfied instead of just one swath of income. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rachel?
I don't know if this is going to move the conversation forward, but typically we do address the unit mix in terms of bedroom count, and we haven't done that yet in this conversation that I can recall, and I believe I've been paying attention the entire time. And the mix in the development as a whole, I'm not implying that there's some major deviation for the unit mix of the BMR units, inclusionary units versus the unit as a whole. It's pretty similar, but it is tipped very much towards the studio junior 1-bedroom smaller unit, right? And so in addition to the rent, well, it's tied to the rents, is the household size that's even going to be accommodated by this type of unit. And I'm looking at the numbers, and particularly in the first scenario, we're looking at 9 units that are more than 1 bedroom. So just thinking of the household size that's going to be occupying most of these units, it's going to be a single person or 2 people. I see that the calculation used here, I think is 1.5 people per bedroom. I don't know if the city could do number of bedrooms plus 1, but regardless, these are going to be pretty small households. And so I just wanted to bring that into the conversation to consider who will be living in these units that may help us decide between scenario 1 and scenario 2.
Which brings me, I had actually noticed that too, Rachel, in my prep. And I was just wondering if there is any flexibility to get 1 more 3-bedroom unit in the low income mix, because it looks to me like the BMR units rounded down in the 2 and 3 bedrooms and rounded up in the studio and junior 1 bedroom. I mean, I know we're dealing with entire units, not fractional units, so you have to round up or down. But it would be nice to round up for the higher bedroom units instead of what has been done. And if we did that, then I'm wondering in the scenario 2, if we could get an additional 3-bedroom unit, or I mean, that would be my preference, at the expense of maybe a 1-bedroom unit, which we have many of. This is probably not the right time to be tweaking and making requests like that. So I'm open to that being the case, but so thank you, Rachel, for bringing that subject back up, because it is also a concern. And thank you, Nevada, for not Nevada, Lauren. I don't know why your hair is the same color. I mix you guys up. And long. But that calculation, because that sort of pushes me towards scenario 2, because at least for some period of time, starting now, the moderate units, income units, will be close to the same affordability as the low income units, and we'll get 3 very low income units. So I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments? If not, then Rhonda and
my only other comment is that, looking at it from a income perspective here, really paints one side of the picture, but the other side of the picture is related to public benefit. And there's a lot of ways to quantify public benefit, but one of the big ways that is getting some airtime at the state level is really looking at rent savings for the family over time. And so it would be interesting to see the city look at this from the perspective that was shared with us today, but then also give us in the future a sense of the public benefit. And rent savings is just one component of that. There's other components as well, but that's an area where I feel that we could really push the policy conversation a little bit to evaluate both parts of that.
Can you say a little bit more about that, Nevada? Are you thinking of the very low income?
Yeah, the very low income,
And
units, the 3 that are proposed in the second scenario, because the rent is $15.22
mhm,
compared to market, which is
mhm,
$29.75. You know, it's kind of easy
Mhm.
math to show that on a monthly basis, there's rent savings to a family. And so, you know, if you look at the 30-year rent savings, for instance, and look at that as a public benefit, and it's just a way to balance it. Like a unit is not only valuable based on what it costs to produce or what it costs to subsidize. There's also value in what it produces in terms of a public benefit. So that's maybe way out there for the purposes of evaluating this, but for me looking at it, that's just on my wish list. I mean, and you know, on my wish list would also be that we had additional 3-bedroom units and greater affordability that we could see really in this project. I don't know if that's possible to do that, but you know, the developer's done what we've asked them to do, and I'm discouraged that there isn't a way to really see more affordability here.
Amen to that. Wendy?
You know, you asked Nevada a little bit what I was going to ask her about, to elaborate more on what she means public benefit, beyond the public benefit of housing people in a place they can afford. So I think I got what she meant beyond the scope of that phrase.
Yeah. All right. Once in the 3 years I've done this, and I actually got a yes. So Andrew, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Would you be willing in scenario 2 to provide an additional 3-bedroom moderate income unit and 16 1-bedroom units?
So I have a policy of not doing math in public
And meetings?
I get myself in trouble otherwise. So we looked at many different scenarios, and here's what tends to happen. If we add another 3-bedroom unit, we end up losing a lot of very low units to make up for the subsidy. So if you look at
but well, just to be clear, I'm just asking you for a little additional subsidy.
I understand.
I'm asking for a gift, so you can say no.
I get it. I mean, you know, to us, the alternative proposed is already above the low income subsidy. As you can see in the chart, you know, the subsidy in the alternative 1 is $873 per unit on average. And alternative 2, it's $906. So we're already going above what is required in our minds. So we're unable to do any more than that.
Okay. Thanks. Lauren?
I just wanted to echo what Nevada and Rachel, actually pretty much everybody has said. It looks like to me that 39 of 48 of these units are going to be available to households of 1 to 3 persons based on HUD's occupancy limits. And we're really trying to house households. And so I completely respect that you don't want to do math and that you don't want to give up a 3-bedroom. I just also want to put it on the record that we really want to make sure that we house full households and not just singles and couples, though that may be what the market supports right now.
Clarification if I may,
Mhm.
immediately on Lauren's point. So apologies. This is, I think, for Rhonda though. What is the occupancy standard that must be used? I don't actually know if that's in the guidelines.
Sure. I'm happy to answer that. And just before I do, I want to make a correction to something I was asked earlier about SB 35. My response was not entirely accurate. So I just want to say Menlo Park is exempt from SB 35 because not only are we meeting our overall housing production towards the RHNA, but also the SB 35 looks at our production towards meeting our lower income housing production. And overall, we have been meeting that. So that's why we're exempt, but it doesn't necessarily, it adds that cumulatively to the very low, low and moderate. So just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Then back
Got
to
it.
Rachel's question. So occupancy right now in the BMR guidelines, we have kind of an odd, what I think might be an error or a typo situation where it allows, and Mike, maybe you can help me with this. I believe it allows our studios or our 1 bedrooms to an occupancy of 4 people, which would under federal and state law be considered overcrowding, which is why I think it was maybe an error in our BMR guidelines. That is one specific item that we will be looking to amend and correct because the city would not want to be in a position where we're approving or encouraging or incentivizing overcrowding in units. So anyways, but right now it does say that. But typically what the city uses is the standard practice of 2 persons per bedroom plus 1 as a maximum occupancy for units, with the exception of studio units, which a maximum occupancy is typically 2.
So in this development, we've got studios that would be a household size of 2. The junior 1 bedrooms would also be a household size of 2. The 1 bedrooms would be a household size of 3. Okay, so the majority is, we're looking at household size.
Between 1 and 3 for 39 of the 48 units.
I would also, if I may, like to add that the unit size makeup is something that staff evaluate when the proposals come in or applications come in from the developers, and we make sure that the BMR units being proposed by unit size match the total overall units in the project. So both in the original proposal that they brought in with all low income and in the mix, they do meet that overall requirement.
Within rounding.
One more item.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it might be helpful to the conversation. Greystar looked at a number of different alternatives. And they submitted actually 3 different alternatives that we looked at. And the one that's before you as an alternative was the best mix of those 3. But again, still the unit sizes still were about the same.
Okay. Thank you. So we have to make a motion. And I know nobody's super excited about any of these scenarios, but we have to choose one, or we can say we don't recommend anything, but that's not really constructive. So Wendy.
Well, I would like to recommend or make a motion that we accept scenario 2.
I second that.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, then I guess we can vote. Let me jot down. Okay, Wendy moves. Wendy. And Lauren second. Number 2. Okay, Lauren, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, and Wendy, you moved, so I assume you're yes. Nevada?
Aye.
And Rachel? On aye or nay on voting for scenario, to recommend scenario 2?
I said I think I muted.
Oh, I didn't, you were on mute. Okay, and that is my preference as well. Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, good discussion. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you,
Thank you.
Payal. Great,
Bye. Thank you.
bye. Okay, next item is a presentation by Housekeys. Yay, welcome Housekeys, on our below market rate housing program and services. I guess Rhonda will introduce the item, and then Rhonda will introduce the Housekeys staff.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair Grove. So just wanted to provide a little bit of background before I turn it over to Housekeys for the benefit of everyone watching and listening. I just wanted to say in early November of 2020, the city issued a request for proposals for below market rate housing administration services and received responses from 4 nonprofit organizations. Given the unique type of services and limited number of contractors in this field, contractors were permitted to submit proposals for a portion of the scope of services or the full scope of services with itemized costs. BMR services include general BMR administration, which is kind of responding to customer inquiries, maintaining records, marketing, as well as rental and ownership services and loan servicing. Of the 4 proposals, 2 organizations submitted proposals for the full scope of services. Staff reviewed and ranked all of the proposals individually. The finalist, Housekeys, was selected based on a number of criteria, including overall cost, experience, capacity, diversity, work methodology, proposal quality, familiarity with BMR housing program administration services, as well as strong references. Also included in their services is technical assistance to developers of inclusionary housing, a very resource heavy but critical function previously provided by city housing staff. The annual cost of their BMR services is a significant reduction from the previous provider while providing an increase in overall service levels. In addition, and maybe most importantly, they were selected also for their user-friendly tools that make access to affordable housing opportunities easier for housing seekers. We entered into contract with Housekeys in February, and over the past few months, Mike Nochi has been working very hard with the Housekeys staff to transition all of the administration services from our previous provider to Housekeys, which is a great segue now for me to introduce the staff here from Housekeys that will present an overview of their organization and services. So I'd like to introduce Julius Nyanda, the program manager, and I believe founder of this organization, although he doesn't often put that in his title, and Christina Enriquez, the program asset manager. So with that, I will hand it off to Julius. Thank you.
All hear me? Just thank you. So I know it's late. I know I've been in a lot of council meetings and planning commission meetings like this before, and I know as it gets late, it's definitely tough to keep up. So I'll try to keep things brief. I try to use a lot of pictures, so hopefully that'll help as we go through this. So I think this is a good meeting to kind of just really emphasize the fact that, you know, local government affordable housing in general is just very complicated, and there's a lot of different aspects of it, right? So what we end up doing a lot is showing that there's sort of this spectrum that exists between state and federal subsidized housing on the left, and then obviously you have market rate housing on the right. And really inclusionary housing is where the local government really sort of uses its land use authority to be able to create affordable housing in addition to what the federal and state government does. So that's the sweet spot that Housekeys exists in. There's a lot of administrators for the other kind of housing, but this local government affordable housing is really where our focus is. A lot of that comes down to the fact that this is a pretty well-intended policy in most cities, but it's operationally challenging for all the parties involved. For the city, obviously issuing permits, planning is already augmented by the fact that you have below market rate units, and that adds to the staff cost to be able to run the program. For the builder, obviously developing a private sector project and then having to meet its affordable housing commitments can be challenging, both not just from a pricing standpoint, but operating that commitment is challenging as well. And then for the applicants, navigating this crazy world of applications, and I got to be eligible for the program, but I got to be able to afford the payment. And there's all these combinations that make it difficult for the applicant as well. And so overall, the House Keys goal is to try to make that easier for all three parties. The other part is California is the leader in this, but we're not the only ones, right? So, you know, when we look at the first inclusionary housing policies, we're on the East Coast, really Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey were the first to really come out with statewide policies. California is really the leader in zoning, period, with the first municipal zoning ordinance in LA in 1908. There are about 11 other cities or states that are actually evaluating following the California model. And California is unique in that it's a statewide requirement for affordable housing, where that's not necessarily the case around the country, where local governments do not have to follow a statewide affordable housing requirement. So as we go around and work and evaluate and research this around the country, we're always interested in seeing that interplay between the federal, local, and state governments. So our role as an affordable housing administrator really is to provide 4 key tools to try to make this a little bit easier for all the parties involved. The first is we combine services staff. So obviously the city is relying on the House Keys staff to provide the service of administering the program. But we combine that with an in-house software engineering team that helps us automate and streamline the workflows needed to do the work. So we're probably the only team in the country that combines real domain expertise services alongside software engineering. There's a lot of software companies out there. There's a lot of domain experts that provide the service. There's not that many that combine the two. We also try to organize this in a marketplace format so that we try to get more cities on the platform to try to aggregate affordable housing for 2 reasons. There's an economies of scale that's reached, but also some of the policy initiatives that were discussed here become more possible as you aggregate more of your affordable housing on one platform. So for instance, right now, we're obviously, I think was mentioned earlier, private sector builders don't have access to the same subsidy that nonprofit builders do. But yet there's a lot of capital market appetite for making investment or impact-based investment, but there's kind of a disconnect between how they get access to projects where they can make an impact. So a subsidy could be something that comes from an impact investor as opposed to something that has to be relied upon from the marketplace. So a lot of what we try to do is try to put this on one platform to enable that downstream as we get more cities on the platform. The network is also a major part of it. There's a lot of players involved. Obviously, we're sitting here at a planning commission talking to the developer, but once the property manager comes into play and you have the other parties involved, there's a lot of parties involved in being able to manage these units. And then lastly, obviously the most important party, the application profiles built by buyers and renters that are trying to get access to this housing, and just understanding how to navigate the difficult world of both. Again, I can't emphasize enough, being both eligible, so I'm below the income limits, but qualified for the opportunity. That's the sweet spot that's very difficult for a lot of applicants to go through. Again, our team is made up of experts that have over 100 years of experience in the field, and we have engineering team that's full-time in-house. Our background really comes from Neighborhood Housing Services Silicon Valley that went under in 2015, but had been around for about 25 years, and South County Housing that had been around for about 40 years, one of the largest affordable housing builders in the region. So a lot of our experience just comes from being in this space, seeing what's needed. And the missing piece that we always notice was there really is no large scale program administrator that cuts across ownership, rental, and finance programs. And that's why we decided to put House Keys in place. Myself, I've been in the business for about 22 years. About 14 of those years are spent consulting local governments. I started doing it heavily during the foreclosure crisis because at that time, a lot of housing counselors didn't have mortgage experience because at that time you had a buyer counselor, but not necessarily a foreclosure counselor in 2006 and 2007. And that got me in this space of really focusing the effort on trying to build a program administration platform. So just the high level points. And again, as a planning commission, these are sort of glaze over points because you all deal with this every day on your meetings. But the home builder must include the affordable units in the project. The buyer and renter meets the income requirements. And then lastly, this is probably the biggest challenge, is how we define affordability is really being challenged in the last 7 or 8 years because median income has increased tremendously. It used to be that CPI versus AMI there used to be, look at the cost inflation, and AMI was actually more affordable. So most programs would say, oh, if we base our resale restrictions on AMI, the homes will increase slower. Well, in the last 5 to 7 years, AMI has increased tremendously, sometimes 18%, 20% per year. And that's caused a major problem, what we deem affordable in communities around the country. San Mateo is case in point. California has an $80,000 a year median income, and obviously San Mateo is sitting at $104,000 for one person. So you can kind of see how this disconnect is only getting wider and wider. And even in a COVID-inspired year or COVID-inflicted year, we had median incomes increase from the previous year. So those new income limits that came out on April 26th are actually higher, from 143,100 to now 149,600, even in the kind of year that we just had. So it's really a tough time for defining affordability. So I spend a lot of time with angry applicants that are trying to understand what is affordable housing, because they don't see that the affordability is there. And to the point, it's now covered the spectrum of not just a very low income household, but the average household is saying, how is this affordable? And so the explanation for a lot of people is that if you live in a high cost county like San Mateo, a household of 3 is said to earn median $134,000 a year. And defining that as affordability based on paying 35% of their income still puts them at nearly a $4,000 a month housing payment. And that's still an affordable housing payment at $4,000 a month, based on just the way that the law, the Health and Safety Code, HUD, sets the price or sets the approach to pricing these units. I took in this example, taxes, insurance, and utilities at about $1,027. So I get down to a mortgage payment of about $2,900. And if I'm using the interest rates, which are also hurting affordability because interest rates are artificially low for the last 5 years, 6 years, now we're sitting at $607,000 as an affordable sales price. Now, relative to the market, hey, the market's gone crazy because comps are just based on what are people willing to pay, and people are willing to pay $2.5 million for a house in Menlo Park. So it's still, luckily, that the below market rate price is actually below, but there are markets in the Bay Area where this price is higher than the fair market value of a home. Same thing's going on the rental side. When we look at that, the low income for San Mateo County for 2021 is $131,750 for a household of 3. So again, these are low income households. So you figure a lot of households make a lot less than that as a household of 3. You take the 30% of that, you come up with an affordable payment of nearly $3,300 a month. You take out the utilities and you're down to about a $3,000 a month housing payment for rent. Now, comparatively speaking, market rents, based on the presentation done earlier, are $4,250. You pull up sites like Rent-A-Meter and others, you'll see that rents are all over the place. When you look at the 25th to 90th percentile rates, could be $6,000 and $7,000 a month in some units. So it's a pretty, just a tough housing situation for most individuals that make the average income, and even the higher end of the average income. So for our requirements, obviously, one of the things we try to do is just walk applicants through the process. The first thing is to apply for the BMR program. You have to live here, live together, form your household, or work here, and your income can't exceed the income limit. So we just try to walk people through their requirements as applicants once we get them past understanding price. From a workflow standpoint, any project that's presenting below market rate units is going to take at least 7 to 21 applicants to go through the process to fill one unit. And that's because of that sweet spot of you find people that may be below the income limit, but they don't make enough to earn and pay that housing payment or that mortgage payment. So that sweet spot of program eligibility and opportunity qualified is one of the most frustrating aspects of the affordable housing work that many do, which is why people can't make it pencil. And even some of my competitors have recently closed their doors because this is just tough work to do, especially if you don't have software that helps you move this process along. So typically an applicant will set up an account at myhousekeys.com. We assign them an application ID. The marketing period for any available unit, we try to give at least 90 days. And I'm using homeownership here, but it's a very similar process for rentals. They have to go through some kind of pre-qualification process on top of being eligible. And then it takes about 60 days to rank applicants that are in a lottery after they've been assigned a number. but that could be longer depending on how many people you have to go through. And then typically the close of escrow is around 45 to 60 days, sometimes longer. And that's the typical process for most applicants. So one of the things we really have to do a lot of is education. And so we put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we're in front of applicants as much as we can. It's a little tougher now with COVID because everything has to be remote. And typically we'd be doing presentations at City Hall or at public forums to try to get more access to individuals in the community. So we look forward to being able to do that, to be out in the community more when things open up. But we have upcoming dates to be able to do two types of presentations. One is the frequently asked questions, which is basically every Friday and every other Saturday. We do the frequently asked question sessions. And then also we do a orientation that's devoted to the program to try to get applicants to understand the application process and the basics of affordable housing. Last point I'll finish out with is, this is how broken our system is. So the federal government looks at the United States in metro areas, right? They don't even look at it at the county level. There's only so much statistically they can afford to do by trying to break up all 3,000 counties in the United States. So they really look at this as a metro. So California has about 29 metros. Our state gets that information from HUD that changed the income limits as of the 26th of April. We break it down into 58 counties, but you all live in 8,057 census tracts throughout the state of California. So a lot of times that disconnect is that your county median income is super high, but you might be talking about something that's built in a particular neighborhood that's part of a census tract that might be lower than that. So some of the evolution that we're hoping to combine the types of data between how we look at location and time and income and economy to try to create maybe better policies as well. So not just administering the programs, but try to use data to inform how policies developed. So that's it. Households are welcome to ask us questions and call into our call center or be able to email our team. We have a dedicated website that we created for the City of Menlo Parks program at housekeys10.com. And then again, we try to do as much as we can to do outreach, and hopefully we improve and get better at that over time. It's always a challenge to get that information out there, but I'm confident that as we grow our team and build out, that we'll be able to get more people involved in the program and get more applicants to be aware of what the opportunities are. So that's it. Try to keep it short and sweet. Hopefully I'll open it up for questions, or anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks. I feel very validated. My little sidebar rant was you just reviewed it.
Absolutely.
All right. I don't know if Lauren or Wendy was first, but it's Wendy's last meeting, so I'm calling on Wendy first.
Thank you, Mr. Nanda. That was great. I saw there one thing. It said that you do a lottery.
Yes. Yep.
So you don't take them in order. Let's say one person's been on the list for a year, another person's been on the list for 5 years. They all go in that lottery?
Well, the wait list is kept. So the wait list number that's been assigned to folks, some of them been on the list 20 years, they keep that number.
Okay.
So typically what happens is when we have a property that becomes available, if somebody's on that list, they indicate that they want to enter the drawing, and that number determines who gets that property. So if number 1 enters the list and number 31 enters the drawing and number 50 enters the drawing, the number 1 is going to be the one that's chosen first. So what we call a drawing is the way that we have the applicant indicate that they want that particular property. So the drawing is a way of us combining applicants with available properties, but
Okay.
that applicant never loses in the case of the ownership program, they never lose their place in line.
Okay. So there is some seniority, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then about how many, if you know off the top of your head, how many people are on the general wait list for buying and or renting in Menlo Park?
I believe we started with less than 300 people on the list, and our goal is to get up to about 1,000 people on the list.
You want to get more people on the list?
Yes. Now, and it's important with the list to distinguish. So the ownership list is a wait list where somebody keeps their number, and as long as they stay valid, they keep their number. The rental program is not on that kind of wait list. The
Okay.
rental program, they have the opportunity and they go through an actual lottery because there is no held wait list number like they do on the ownership side.
So the rental is a real lottery.
Yes.
Wow. That's can be discouraging to some people, I would think. But
That's the policy as it stands right now. If we get guidance to change that policy, then that's and inclusionary housing is a little different. So that's the other part. I was just on a call recently with a TCAC project that had a combination of inclusionary and not even they were all TCAC units, but there were some referral units and non-referral units where the city had a wait list that they were referring into the project. And some of the difference there is that when the project's 100% affordable, there's kind of a different sort of approach to those applicants. It's all about access, right? So a lottery might be something that people look at as an adverse impact. But with inclusionary, there's such a small percentage of that project that is affordable that's why the scarcity leads you to do a lottery, because it is like a lottery ticket, so to speak, because there's only 10 or 15 for every 100 units that are being produced.
yeah. Okay, one other thing. You said about 300. Is that for the housing or for are those buyers or renters or both?
Both, because the way that the list was done before, it's combined. So people either check the box for ownership or rental or both.
Got it. All right, thank you.
No problem.
Lauren?
Thank you, thank you. A couple of quick questions. Could you go back to slide 12 really quickly?
Sure.
It was the 3 levels of preference, I think.
Yep.
And so that was, it looked like live, work, or is the third one households current gross? Okay.
Yeah, that's more of a general, sorry, the third one is more of a general requirement that they can't be over the income limit.
Got it.
So
Okay.
they're not, so they're, because the way it's set up now, you have to meet the first 2 conditions to even get in. These are all conditions, not necessarily preferences per se.
Okay, so the way that your wait list works, to get an interview at all, you have to meet one of those 2 qualifications.
Yes.
Got it. Do you have, I guess with 200 people, that's not a lot in my mind, given you go through 7 to 21 for each unit, and we're talking about 48 units. That's gone.
Yes.
So are you willing to put people on the wait list for rental or home ownership that don't meet those qualifications?
That's guidance from the city. So we run it as however the city's policies work, that's how we run it. And I believe we talked recently with staff, and Rhonda can probably answer this better than I can.
Sure, happy to hop on with this one. So the city in our BMR guidelines has preferences established for live work, also for persons displaced in 2008, which is something we're going to look at in the BMR guidelines updates, and then also for unhoused persons. So those are preferences. So folks who have preferences they get priority in any lottery. So I want to distinguish too that we have a wait list for BMR ownership housing. And like Julius was described earlier, that wait list is established by date of application. And so it stays in that order. And they get the higher your number on the wait list, the sooner you get an opportunity at a purchase. The rental list is only an interest list. The rental market changes a lot. If somebody's looking for a rental, oftentimes they find what they need long before something comes available. And I would say in Menlo Park, we also have a difficult time locating tenants to occupy our BMR units, in particular, our low income units. We have some of those that are vacant for a long period of time, and we notify the few hundred people on our interest list, and very few are interested. So we have a hard time with that. But the great benefit of working with House Keys is not only now do we have our folks who meet our preferences, who will always move ahead of anyone else, even in a lottery situation, but we also have access to all the other people who have submitted their names to House Keys and meet the general requirements. So if we don't have enough folks that meet our preferences, it opens up then to anyone who meets the income qualifications. So hopefully that answers your question.
Got it. It does. Thank you for that. I just want to really strongly make a push for supporting the notion of getting everybody on an interest list, because when I was doing BMR administration work, one of the things that I found was the quickest thing to change in a person's household was their preference level. And so people would go in and out of preference or priority, however you want to call it, just based on job, who's living at home, things like that. And so it fluctuates a lot. And so I think that we could widen our pool of applicants, because there's certainly a lot of people in this area that need housing. So I support how you guys do it and I appreciate it. One of the other things that I wanted to ask about was, we mentioned the seniority aspect of the home ownership wait list. And is there a fee to stay on the list?
No, there was a fee with the previous administrator. We did not charge a fee for to stay on the list.
Okay, so previous administration did, sorry, one more.
No problem, no problem.
So the previous administration, the way that they worked it was that they kept people certified. And so you guys are going to do same, or are you guys going to certify as new projects come up with opportunities?
It'll be the same thing. So nobody loses their place in line. They just have a valid or invalid place in line, right? So if you don't certify for that year, then you're not valid to move into a project. So that it still keeps that person, but it does do the same thing where we do certify their eligibility, that everything is accurate.
Oh, okay. So a person can not renew and still be on the list? Is that what you meant by invalidate?
Yes, it just means that you have a valid or invalid application ID, so to speak. So everybody that's on the list, let's say 1 through 150, all 150 people verified that the information is accurate. All 150 people have an active or valid number. But let's say the 50th person on the list does not, and you get another person that's 151, you don't want to lose that person for a lot of compliance reasons, right? They could come back and say, I didn't get a fair shot. And so we just keep that same list incrementally growing, and we just maintain the updates. But it's sort of a self-serve, so they're able to upload and validate that their paperwork matches their PG&E bill or the income, so they can do that with a live file any given time throughout the year.
So when you say cert, you're talking self-cert rather than presenting taxes, bank statements, everything.
And they still upload those items when our staff does the certification, but the idea is to have somebody not be locked into certifying within the next week or 2 weeks. It's sort of like on their anniversary date, they need to make sure that that is updated without having to worry about, you don't want to create two things. Either you have the information or you don't. It's not that you couldn't get it during the week that I asked it, right? Because now you got people getting speaker cards saying, I didn't get a fair shot. They invalidated my account unfairly.
Okay, got it. So the information may or may not be stale dated, but it gives people a fair shot at having a better idea within a year of whether they certify or not.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, I'm going to call on Nevada, and then unless we have burning clarifying questions, I'm going to go to public comments. So, Nevada.
Thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. I guess my question just is a little bit conceptual. Do you have a rule of thumb for cities in terms of how many BMRs are part of a particular agreement? Do you have a minimum number that you like to see?
No, not necessarily, because we've seen it all over the map. We've seen projects with, a much larger, some cities have 30% affordable. So you have much larger projects. So we don't see any correlation between, but again, we're still early in our in our analysis. I mean, you'd have to ask me when we have a lot more cities what we see, but so far we see a lot of agreements in the cities that we work in, and we don't see a reason or to be partial to any one kind of configuration of project count or unit count to project.
Okay. It will be interesting just to see in future presentations if it's I'm not sure if the expectation is that you'll be giving a quarterly report, which is what we had from our previous administrator, but I'll be interested to see once you get just your arms around the portfolio that we have and the number of below market homes and then the number of agreements. And it's my impression that there's kind of a lot of one-offs in there because we've liked to see the home provided. And I'm just curious, at some point in the future would invite your feedback in terms of whether or not you think that makes the program difficult to administer or if it's addressable through the ways that you have set up your system. So just as you kind of get to know us, that's a burning question I've had. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So I think we can go to public comment. We'll still have a chance to discuss things after hearing public comment.
Okay.
So Mike, is there any public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature, and I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And I'll just give it a second here. And I do not see any hands raised at this moment, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thank you. This looks, first of all, everything that you're saying, what's really stands out about your presentation is that you can put yourself into the shoes of all parties. And most refreshingly, you can put yourself into the shoes of the people seeking housing in a really natural and authentic way. And that to me is really important and I appreciate it. So I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
And I thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. And there's somebody else from your staff here. And I think I remember that you have Spanish language competency. Can you speak to that a little bit? We do have some monolingual Spanish speakers in our community.
Yes.
And that's a valuable contribution.
Yeah, I would say half of our staff speak Spanish. So we definitely, that's a big part. I mean, we all come from the housing space, and being in California, we know that that's a big part of it. I mean, we try to look for language. We're language acquisition folks. And we actually, one of the startups that are in a accelerator program I was in is called Wordly.ai. The idea is to create meetings in any language. And hopefully we'll be able to collaborate with them soon to start doing orientation classes across many different languages. So we're excited about that prospect soon, hopefully.
Great. Another question in and out of my brain. It's getting late. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity.
I'll be around.
Yeah. Any other last thoughts from other commissioners? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. And we will move on, Commission, to item D4, which is a update on tenant and landlord assistance programs. And again, Rhonda will introduce the item.
Hello, good evening. So just want to introduce this item. Since March of 2020, at the onset of COVID impacts, there has been a great deal of concern and information circulating related to tenants and landlords, various rental assistance programs, displacement, evictions, and legal remedies. Tonight, we invited two subject matter experts to provide facts, information, and updates. I'm very pleased to introduce Latrice Taylor with Samaritan House and Keith Ogden with Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto. Ms. Taylor and her organization administer the city's emergency rental assistance program, which was funded with $100,000 from the city. Her organization also serves as the core service center for South San Mateo County and administers a broad range of supportive assistance programs, including food distribution, assistance to homeless individuals, and access to housing. Mr. Ogden and his organization provide a wide range of services, including free legal services to help tenants and landlords work to resolve issues, including recent concerns related to COVID impacts. Through their efforts, they work to ensure tenants are able to live in safe, healthy, and affordable homes. Their organization provides many other services, but tonight, Mr. Ogden will be focusing on their housing work. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Taylor to provide some information, who will be followed by Mr. Ogden. So thank you.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kaufman, for inviting me to present tonight. And I'm sure you're all very much interested. First off, I'll give you a couple of different pieces of information. But I know, number one, you're interested in how the financial assistance went thus far. I want to first say thank you so very much for giving back to the residents, because Menlo Park residents did need the support of the city. So we can say on their behalf, thank you so very much. Of the $100,000 that initially started off as the rent relocation assistance fund, which you then changed it to financial assistance to support those affected by COVID-19. It has been 1 year since that happened. And in that time, we have now spent $95,471. So we have $4,529 left. And we have helped 30 households of 85 individuals. When we spend the last bit of that money, we'll do a final report and a final narrative. We'll give you a little bit more of the demographic information, such as, members of the household, what some of the circumstances were, but we'll provide that once the last dollar is spent. But thank you so very much. And also I will add, because you set the standard for how other cities are supposed to help their residents. Other cities then came to Samaritan House and also said, we wanted to help our residents because we heard what Menlo Park was doing. So we had at least 5 other cities in San Mateo County that used your work as a template for their own. So I wanted to say thank you, because you set the standard for other cities in this county. Next, I know there's concern about what is going on as far as rental assistance. As you know, Samaritan House is the fiscal agent for all of the core agencies that covers all of the county. In this past year, we have, including your funds, we've had to help with close to $10 million in rental assistance from various funds. And so the Menlo Park financial assistance helped in giving back and taking care of our residents so they did not wind up evicted. Now I know Mr. Ogden's going to probably refer to the eviction moratorium that is soon to come. I know everyone heard earlier today about the judge vacating the CDC order, so that was very distressing. And just so you know, the cores and the county are already in talks about what happens next. We're already planning on July 1, just in case the county or the state does not move forward with continuing the eviction moratorium. But in the meantime, we still have funds available. In addition to that, one thing I want to share, I know you've heard about St. Mission Asset Fund, which are funds that were made available for those who were not eligible for stimulus checks. We're still in partnership with them, and to date, there is still some funds available, but I did want to report for Menlo Park specifically, over 600 households did apply for funds and over 300 were approved for funds for Mission Asset Fund. So those were folks who could not apply for unemployment or could not get a stimulus check. So I thought I would share that with you and let you know that they still have funding available. Lastly, federal dollars. As you know, it was decided that for San Mateo County, the $40+ million that was designated or allocated to this county are being administered by a state agency called LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. And we, Samaritan House, is one of the local partners, as are other local partners such as Nuestra Casa, Project Sentinel, the San Mateo County of Realtors, Community Legal Services, and a host of other agencies are on board to help residents apply for those federal dollars. So the one thing as a takeaway is I will forward the county's flyers to Ms. Kaufman, that they're in multiple languages, but housingiskey.com. If anyone says they need help, and we're talking about rental arrears going back from March of 2020 through this month, they can apply for rental assistance, and utilities as well as another thing that they can apply for. So I will share the flyer with you. But one thing to know is we're trying to reach those communities that are hard to reach, those who do not have access to computers or they struggle with computer literacy. On the flyer, it actually, let's see if I actually know what I'm doing. Yes, I do. I just learned how to share. So this is the flyer that is being shared by the county. This gives the information as to who can apply, because it has to be renters and landlords. They both will apply. It's 2 separate applications. A lot of the developers have already, large housing apartment complexes, a lot of them have already started to apply, as well as the smaller mom and pops, if you will. Anyone who has rent in arrears going back to March of last year can apply. Landlords can be reimbursed up to 80% of that past due rent if they agree to waive 20% of unpaid rent. If a landlord chooses not to, then the renter still is eligible for 25%, at least to hold them in place because of the current eviction moratorium. So there is still some help, but again, we don't know what will happen come July 1. Other things to know for our county, just to help, is in the county, there has been requested over $18 million from residents across all of San Mateo County. Of that, they've requested it of LISC. Of that, $1,764,000 has been approved, and over $300,000 has already started to be paid out to residents of San Mateo County. So I thought I'd share, because I know it might have started off a little slow, but LISC is ramping it up. They are paying, they are calling, and so we are hearing that residents are getting their applications reviewed, and landlords and residents are being contacted so they can get their applications processed. As I said, I will forward the flyer. It has the LISC number on there. For Housing is Key is the website. There's a toll-free number, and we always say to people now, Samaritan House as well as all the cores, we tell people just go ahead and just apply, call, just do that. Don't even come through us initially. But if they need additional assistance, then they're being referred to a local partner like Samaritan House or Nuestra Casa or Project Sentinel. We're to help the landlords and the residents with any of the questions, if they need to upload documents, if they need to figure out whatever it is to apply, we're doing that. So it's really as simple as that. And then if anybody has questions, they can always give us a phone call. We are definitely here to help. So I think with that said, if there are any questions.
I have one. You said for the LISC, the chunk of money that LISC is managing,
Yes.
$18 million has been requested and $1.7 million has been approved.
I'll say that it
That's-
was 18 million has been requested, 18,430,000, yeah, and 1.764 has been approved. And
Okay,
so
but-
then,
My question is the difference between those numbers is not people who've been rejected. It's just they
Right.
haven't made a decision yet either
they're
way.
in process.
I mean, maybe some
Yes.
have been rejected, but mostly they're just still in process.
Right. Might be
Okay,
just a
good.
document. and the call.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
And I guess we'll do some questions for Latrice and then we'll hear from Keith and then we may have questions for both of you. Okay, Lauren? Or was it Rachel first? Okay, Rachel. Wait, who are you pointing to?
Lauren, go ahead.
Lauren, Rachel is, I think, pointing to you, although it's opposite on my screen.
Woman. Okay, so I had the question about the 18 million as well, so I appreciate you asking that. And it sounded like the numbers for mission assets, the 600 that applied, but only half of them qualified.
Thus far, yeah, thus far.
Okay, so
yes.
that's still in process.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I just want to be able to give you figures as far as Menlo Park, the city. Yes.
Appreciate it. Do you know how many people have been rejected approximately?
No, that I don't know.
Okay. All right. That's perfectly fine. I appreciate it. And it looks like the 95,000 that you guys spent over 30 households is approximately $3,200 a household. So that's like market rent. So thank you.
And the max that y'all set per your MOU was 5,000. So just so you know, there were some that needed that $5,000. There were some that because of the 25% eviction moratorium, I will tell you, I see applications where people have owed $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 across my desk. So yeah, it's listening to some of the previous presenters. I'm very glad we have the support and the teamwork that's going on in this county because it is definitely needed.
Yeah, it would not surprise me that $20,000 or $30,000 would cross your desk, given it's hard to find any place to rent for $2,000. And if you've been out of work the entire time, that's easy 12 months that you're already there. So thank you for the sensitivity that you are doing this work with. And I appreciate your answers and you being here.
Sure.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Rachel. Oh, sorry. I forgot that Go.
No problem. Okay. I have 2.5 questions. The first is, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm not sure if this is information that you would have because you're not asked to collect this, but do you have a sense of was it really the distribution of the 95,000, was it, pretty linear? People came and asked for help and they received help, or was there a big upfront, where the funds used 75% used upfront, or has it been very consistent over the past year?
What we try to do is look at all the funding that's available to us. So it's consistently been people coming from Menlo Park needing help. I mean, we just received even just 2 applications the other day from residents. So it's really a matter of trying to pick and choose which fund we should use. And we really wanted to be strategic with your funds. So we didn't want to just all of a sudden spend it all last summer. Even though we did have Menlo Park residents, we could have spent it last year, but we really didn't feel that we should. We really thought there should be we should spend it for other reasons. They were COVID related, but we really wanted to feel like you would get the maximum bang for your buck, if you will. So I just didn't, as it looked like it was going for longer and longer, we just felt like we shouldn't just spend it all at once. And then here we are a year later and you're not feeling like you're still helping your residents. So it's being strategic.
And that's a really important point about how Samaritan House provides assistance, right? Because you have access to various funding.
Yes.
Pools. So when someone comes for help, you check to see which ones they're eligible for.
Right.
You don't just take from the one, you look at the whole universe of
Yes. Yes.
That's
Because other funders also want to help too. That's also the other thing you want to consider, is others do want to help and be part of the solution too.
Thank you. So my other question is going to be, because there are different funding, I mean, there's the LISC administered fund now. Everybody has slightly different requirements that they place on the funding, and that influences, the application process for the individual. So I'm just wondering if you found, for Menlo Park's part, if there are any improvements we need to make there to the requirements or to the application that would make it easier, or compared to the other.
Well, I'll say. And Mr. Ogden is definitely supportive to us, because one thing, there are tenants who are subleases. Rent a room. They have a separate lease with the master tenant, but not with the landlord. We have disaster relief funds that we can utilize in those instances. I don't have to get a W-9 and report taxes. I don't have to do that for those, say, private funders who just want to help. But if it's something that is designated as disaster relief, if you may want to consider helping people who are subleases, and we put in requirements around that so we can eliminate fraud, if you will. We know how to do that, but that might be a consideration. I know it's the city, so there's a lot of rules and regulations, so you may not be able to. But that's just something of a consideration for those who are not the main tenant, but they also are renting in our communities as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, thank you, Latrice, so much.
Thank you. Sure.
And now we'll go to Keith. Welcome, Keith.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for hanging in there. Is everybody doing okay? Do we need raise your hand if you need a bio break. All right, we're doing okay.
Power through. I love it.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Ms. Kaufman, for reaching out to me and to CLESPA, to Community Legal Services. Can you all hear me okay? All right,
yes.
Great. So yeah, I just want to speak mostly to the sort of the context that Latrice has already kind of spoken to. And then just at the end, I have just some brief thoughts, and then at the end, a few specific asks just for your consideration. So, I mean, it goes without saying, it's been an incredibly challenging year for all. You know, we work with tenants, but it's been a challenging year for tenants and landlords during the pandemic. And as you all know, the county of San Mateo and other counties around the area and around the state took initiatives kind of right away once we realized what we were facing. So end of March, beginning of April, and then extended those through the summer as it was clear that the state still wasn't taking any action definitively to address really what has been to some extent, but would have been to a much larger extent, you know, a wave of more displacement and more destabilizing of families and communities because of how many people were impacted financially at the onset of the COVID pandemic. So, you know, I don't have any data, but I also am hopeful, and maybe health experts do have data, that preventing displacement and overcrowding and homelessness also did help to mitigate the spread of COVID. So as a result of the creative and common sense legislation that happened locally in San Mateo County, we'll just specifically talk about San Mateo County because that's where we are. Landlords and tenants are now in a position to be made whole essentially through the state rent relief program that Latrice just talked about. That, you know, has had quite a few hiccups getting started, but hopefully we're going to see improvements. There's a massive feedback loop happening. San Mateo County, Latrice is a vital part of that, is part of that feedback loop to the state to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our local residents, because it's challenging. It's challenging to access those state funds. But we are all working together to make it less challenging to increase access. And so with really what's now a massive amount of funds relative to what was available before, there's actually a way to address the financial impact in significant ways. And we're just starting to see that. And so I proceed with the belief that this program does have the potential to be really significant for a lot of people, especially if it's able to reach those who need it most. And so I think the flyers that Ms. Taylor spoke of, and if Menlo Park can help with getting those out, there's the county website. Community Legal Services at the beginning of the pandemic started a website called urcommunity.org. And we have been updating it over time. And we've just gone through an update that addresses the state rent relief program and addresses some of the finer points. There are concerns people have, you know, well, can I apply? Am I eligible? Especially in the undocumented community. And they're talking about citizenship, or there's no requirement. There's no application questions about that. So it's really important for people to feel confident in that. And also this money, if a tenant receives it, is not to be counted against someone in terms of a public charge type of calculation. So those are important things, and those are up on our website, up on the urcommunity.org website. So Nuestra Casa, like Latrice said, others have been instrumental in developing some of those materials and aiding us in updating our website as well. So, so what's set to happen right now, and perhaps everybody in the room knows it, or perhaps a few people don't, is that June 30th, as of now, the state COVID-19 protections against eviction for non-payment as a result of COVID impacts are set to expire. So that means that July 1st, if someone's not able to pay rent in July and they're still out of work, or they're still underemployed in a way that means that they can't meet all of their financial obligations and they can't pay all of the rent, they could be evicted. And that's super scary because there's not a magic switch for families who are living on the edge of displacement, with the prospect of homelessness. So we don't know. Ms. Taylor already spoke to this. We don't know what the state's going to do. I haven't been privy to many conversations that have given me much hope, but I still have hope that the state will extend. figure out a way as we get into a new phase of the pandemic to extend in a way that's equitable for all involved, and that also really pays attention to the state rent relief program. And actually, Latrice, if I can ask a question of you, just to make sure I understand things right. The state rent relief money is going to continue to be available after July 1st, correct?
Yes, yes.
Right. But do we know yet if it will be available to help people who are in need of rental assistance in July, or it'll just be for rent through June? We don't know yet.
Yeah, because really, in fact, they were only letting people apply through March, and only as of the 15th did they start to allow through
Correct.
April.
Right.
So it's a month by month for
Right.
any
So
beyond.
we can all hope that the state will fix that mismatch that could be pretty significant. But I think there's more that all of us can do. So, obviously I believe firmly that California should extend the protections beyond June 30th and find a match with the rent relief, find a way to have all of that work in concert to make tenants and landlords whole. So yesterday morning, I was not there. A colleague of mine was there. On the Zoom board of supervisors meeting, but they did talk, and maybe some of you have more up-to-date information than I do. Talk about, or at least there were people there urging the county to consider an ordinance that would be like a safety valve. If the state doesn't do anything, then this ordinance will provide some measure of tenant protections for COVID-19 related impacts starting July 1st, similar to what the county passed for April through August. So really the three things that I think that you all could urge, and I was talking to Rhonda about this, these have to happen quickly. One, sort of the most basic level, urging the state to extend the protections, some sort of a city resolution or letter, and talking to other cities in the area who may be considering doing that. Daly City, South San Francisco, East Palo Alto, Redwood City, San Mateo, seeing who's thinking about doing that. The second would be to urge the creation of a countywide ordinance, like I just talked about. And then the third would be to create a Menlo Park ordinance that would go into effect on July 1st. And thank you, Ms. Kaufman, for reminding me that Menlo Park does have a precedent for this. If y'all remember, in the fall of 2019, the state did pass new tenant protections. This was pre-COVID. It's hard to get our minds around that period of time, but in the fall of 2019, I think it was September or early October that the bill was signed into law, and it was called, I call it AB 1482, but it was somewhere along the lines of California Tenant Protection Act. But it didn't go into effect. It wasn't an emergency order or anything like that. It didn't go into effect until January 1st. So cities around the state, including Menlo Park, on November 11th or 19th, something like that, of 2019, passed an ordinance that was just an emergency ordinance, sort of a stopgap. And so Menlo Park has done something like this before. Menlo Park could look at what the county did in the spring and summer of 2020, and could also have something ready to go if the state doesn't do anything. It'll be a waterfall. If the state doesn't do anything, and if the county doesn't do anything. So again, when we first, I help with our own rental assistance fund. We talk to Latrice all the time because we try to coordinate, and also with Legal Aid Society. Obviously, our funds are not nearly on the same scale as the core service agencies, but we try to use our funds strategically. And it was just overwhelming last March and April and May. The amount of calls that we were getting, increased by at least tenfold. The amount of money that we assisted with increased by at least tenfold for us just in the short span of a few weeks. And that carried through into the summer. And I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but just to say that it's beautiful now on one level that the state and the federal government finally did recognize the scale of this nationally, and that there's funds that are able to get distributed, even though there's a lot of hiccups with that. There's a lot of need for outreach, continued outreach, in any way that the city of Menlo Park can help with that is great. But I would hate to see that on July 1st, some families who have held on and who may actually be working now part-time and hadn't been working for a while, but still aren't able to meet all of their demands, including all the rent demands, would then be evicted and displaced. You know, who have kids in the schools, or who are getting treated for medical treatments at the local hospital, or things like that. So that's really what I have to say. I again appreciate being invited here. You know, the timing is tight because it's May 5th, but it's not too late, I hope, for Menlo Park to consider some of these things and to be in dialogue with other cities in the county, especially around, you know, some of these ideas. So I think the collaborative effort, as I've experienced, even recently with the San Mateo County effort with the state rent relief, I think it's vital. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to share those thoughts and those ideas.
Thank you. I see that Lauren has her hand up. Go for it.
Does anyone else want to speak before me? Because I've talked a lot tonight. No. Okay.
Everyone will have a chance. You can
Okay.
speak.
So the reality of an eviction cliff on July 1st. Can we talk about what CLESPA's actual capacity is to help our renters? Because I think that's the flip side of this, right? It's a really good moral thing to do, but we also have to talk about what happens if we don't do it.
You
Well,
mean if we don't protect?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two answers to that, right? One answer is that some people just, if they truly don't have any protections, then there's not much to do. And so we're going to have to use our resources where people do have protections, or, you know, or where people do have, where there's some other avenue to pursue to help them. And you know, that's not to say that we will use our resources to do what we always do, which is to help people respond to eviction papers, counsel, give people advice. We're at the court. It's on Zoom still, but we're at the court on Zoom every Tuesday now to do just that for people who are pro se tenants who haven't spoken to a lawyer or may have just spoken to a lawyer once, in getting a little bit of assistance with their answer. Or getting a lot of assistance with their answer and spoke to an attorney at that point, but then haven't spoken to an attorney since then. And on that point, actually, we are more than ever coordinating with Legal Aid Society too, because they do a lot of answers. We do some, they do a lot, to be able to connect with clients more readily and more easily in the interim in that phase. So that's one. And then, you know, but I can't predict what the number is going to be, and I can't predict if we're going to be overwhelmed or not. But if there are a lot of people getting non-payment evictions in July, you know, it will be it'll likely be overwhelming for us and for Legal Aid Society. So,
don't call me a fortune teller, but in my guesstimation here, if we just heard a report that $100,000 helped 30 households, I'm thinking that there's probably going to be many households, potentially more than 30, that are going to need rental assistance, who are going to be coming up against those illegal evictions, actual evictions,
Yeah.
and all of those things. And I think one of the things that people don't necessarily talk about is the impacts that evictions have on a city. And the truth of the matter is that eviction is one of the top causes of homelessness. And we know that homelessness is wickedly more expensive than keeping a person in their housing. So if we could preempt an incredibly costly thing by helping beforehand, it seems like it would behoove us to do so.
And you're talking, I mean, two sides of the coin are funding assistance and tenant protections. So what Latrice and I have talked about tonight. Certainly with the funds that we have, which again are not on the scale of what we've heard tonight at all, but we are looking at, you know, that potential cliff. So that, but again, I think this is what I was getting at, thinking about what our response last spring. It was a let's do everything we can, and then it was a everything we can is so small. It's so little compared to the reality. So
From the research that I have worked with, it sounds like California residents are billions of dollars in behind.
Arrears.
Yes. And so I just anticipate that y'all don't have that kind of money sitting around.
yeah, so the state program, I mean, I don't know
the
the
state program is landlord based essentially, right? So it's the 80% that
it's
if the landlord opts in, rather than the 25% that happens if the renter opts in.
all of it goes through June, and so all of it is supposed to cover up through June. If the landlord doesn't choose to participate, the tenant would still apply and get the 25%, and they get the protections against eviction for not paying the other 75%. So it's obviously it's a huge incentive for landlords. That's why you see so many big property owners who immediately jumped on it, right? And there's still a lot of education and outreach to do to families who own one or two rental properties, right? For them to be encouraged to apply. And so the group that we're working with in San Mateo County is looking at that also and working at that also. So that's a really important part of it. But the numbers that I've heard are that this state rent relief money coming to San Mateo County is somewhere around $47 million, right? Thank you for verifying that, Latrice. And that actually would, if all of it were actually utilized, would meet a significant portion of the demand. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Nevada.
Hi, Keith. Good evening. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
I am just curious if you think that if there's any impact locally for the federal CDC eviction moratorium. And that I just read today that a federal judge had vacated the eviction moratorium, and I wasn't sure if there's implications for that you're aware of that you could share with us.
Yeah, so I think there's the one way to read it is that it applies in Georgia. I think that's where it was, right? And that although the judge would wish for it to apply everywhere, that's to be seen. And so it would have to, I think, be challenged. I haven't studied it yet. This is just sort of what I'm starting to gather because it just happened this morning, but that there still is a certain level that it would need to be challenged here locally in California. But the question that we haven't answered is, where there are, where the rubber would meet the road is if there is a stay that somebody has per the CDC order, and then, a landlord or property owner does try to go to court and say that stay should no longer apply, and then what would the local court do? I think that's where we might see it. It only goes through June 30th at this point. It's not a lot more protection. Also, the crucial element with the CDC order, why it's pretty, it does play a role, but it doesn't acknowledge that there's a lot of money that's unpaid. The state law does. The state law both acknowledges that in tenant protections and also now in actual real relief for landlords and tenants, right? The CDC orders just say, okay, during this time period, you can't be evicted if these things are true for you related to COVID. But it doesn't say anything about what happens to that debt, right? And whether you could, potentially be evicted for it later. So that's
I've been curious if it will change the landscape for additional federal investment in rental assistance programs beyond.
That's a good question.
But that's just something that we can, if you learn more about that, maybe you could send information to Rhonda just to keep us in the loop. Because of course, us locally, we were using a lot of federal stimulus money from CARES Act and other things to fund these programs. So.
Yeah, it would be hard to imagine that the both rounds of the recent federal legislation that put money into these funds, that would be changed. The CDC sort of on its own did this order, right? And I see that as separate from the congressional legislation. But if I hear anything different, I will definitely, get the word out.
Keep us posted. Yeah, we're all learning this as we go.
Exactly. Thank you.
I think if there are no more questions from us, I will just check in with public commenters who should have a chance to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Take it away, Mike.
You got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature now, and I will have the ability to open your microphone. And you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. I know we have a few attendees still on,
hanging in there,
but it doesn't look like we have any hands raised at the moment. So I will return the meeting to you.
Okay. All right, well, it is now 9:04. Any other questions for our wonderful speakers and wonderful community supportive people? And Keith, I want to actually just let you finish by reiterating your asks of us so that we end with clarity around that.
Yeah, and if you would like, so the first one was, some sort of city resolution, and I believe Daly City may be the first city in the county that has either passed it or considered it, and maybe putting it up. So I can certainly share whatever is available publicly, and I can reach out, Ms. Kaufman or Ms. Grove, if you'd like to reach out to me on that. The second would be to reach out to Warren Slocum and to others on the Board of Supervisors, have dialogue with them. What are they thinking, and the importance of creating a safety valve, if you will, if the state doesn't do anything. And then the last would be, looking at what Menlo Park did in November of 2019 on very short order. That was within the span of basically a month and a half. And so is it possible to do something here within the span of a month and a half? To have something ready to go on July 1st, similar if the county isn't going to act, and if it, in case the state doesn't act. But it certainly makes sense to go to the county first. It's both efficient and it's more comprehensive that way, and certainly that's what happened in the spring of last year. So
yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Latrice, do you want to share any concluding words? Anything you want to put top of mind?
One thing I think somebody was saying statewide, I did find the report from, I think it was Urban Footprint, It was 844,000 households, 14% of renter households, which is 6% of all households in California, are at risk of eviction because of the rental gap. That equals to about $1.4 billion in a monthly rental gap. I believe in this county, though, we have the concern, we have the will, and we have the wherewithal, if you will. This is a county that really does want to come together and try and keep people housed. So I really do appreciate all the work that's being done here, all the information you're gathering so that informed choices can be made for the residents, not only of Menlo Park, but really honestly of the county as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. So we will move on to our ad hoc committee formation, I think is next. Yeah, item D5. I'll pass this on to Rhonda to introduce.
Thanks, Chair Grove. So this is, I think, close to my final item. We've talked about this a little bit throughout the meeting, but this item is related to the BMR guidelines amendment. So if you all recall, one of the primary work items in the Housing Commission's work plan is to amend the BMR guidelines. This was the last update was in 2018. And there was a subcommittee that initiated some work, but due to limited staff resources, we had to set it aside. So the good news is it was reprioritized back on the work plan. But in order to initiate those changes, some that we covered tonight, an ad hoc needs to be set up, and it would be comprised of members from the Housing Commission to work with staff. Just in terms of workflow, we would expect the ad hoc to meet at least monthly, and it would be remotely, same way that we're doing now. And then any work that the ad hoc wants to move forward for formal action would be reported on and brought back to the full Housing Commission for any action items. But the ad hoc would give monthly updates on what they're working on. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair to call for volunteers.
Okay. I would like to call for volunteers. Lauren volunteers. And I'm thinking of like asking Nevada to volunteer, but I know Nevada would be a resource, whether she, well, no, you can't be. You have to volunteer if you want to be a resource on this, Nevada, because of Brown Act. So so Lauren's in. I could certainly be in, but I want to wait and see what Nevada and Rachel are thinking.
I probably am not going to be able to do it, but thank you, and I hope that we can well, I hope I can contribute in a different way with the full commission.
Rachel, what are you thinking?
What is the expected time frame? When would we return with a recommended set of amendments?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it depends on the amount of work, but the goal was to get it back to City Council by the fall. So we have a few months, but there's a lot of different pieces of it. But the fall is the estimated timeline.
And there can be 3 members?
It could be what?
3 members or 2?
There could be 3. So yeah. I will volunteer, and Rachel, you can also volunteer or not. I see you struggling, counting the hours in your day. Okay, so are you, Rachel?
That's everybody then, right? Because
yeah. Did you say what? I haven't heard you volunteer or not, or decline.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, good. Well, if there's 3 of us, then if somebody's really busy, the other two can pull the boat along. All right. And Wendy, you know I'm not asking you, so because you won't be with us.
Don't go.
All right, so is that done? We don't need, oh, do we need, it says public comment. Should we ask for public comment on this?
Yes,
In my script. Okay.
I believe we
comment.
should, just being it's a regular item.
Okay.
So, just as a reminder for anyone listening in and attendees, please use the raised hand feature if you'd like to provide public comment on this item. And I do not see any hands raised, so I will return the meeting to you.
Okay, so we don't need a motion. We have consensus. And we have our ad hoc. And the next item is reports and announcements. We have no ad hoc subcommittees active right now, so we have no reports on those. Do any commissioners have any updates? No? Okay. Oh, was that a hand raised, Wendy, or just a hand moving? No. Okay. Recommended future agenda items. Seeing none.
Actually, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself.
Okay.
Is it appropriate to have an agenda item on what we just discussed regarding potential future city funds? These are city council decisions, but we could recommend, right? And potentially, preparing an emergency ordinance.
That's a great question for Rhonda, because it's not in our work plan, but it's important.
Yeah, I'll make note of it. I'll need to follow up with the city attorney. There was recently some changes in, some of you may be aware of it, in legislation that's being recommended to city council and the process for how that has to happen. So I'll refresh on that. I'll check in with the city attorney and I will follow up on that. That's okay. But
Okay.
this, I think, as Mr. Ogden iterated, time is of the essence here because of the expiration dates.
Right. Yeah. So maybe you can follow up with me and Rachel, like before, not just at our next meeting, but in between. Yeah.
Sure. And also,
Yeah,
I think
okay.
Mr. Ogden also said, I mean, he was providing information to the full Housing Commission, but as individuals, you're all can make any recommendations to the county or others that you wish.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. All right. Any other future agenda items for meetings? One thought I had,
think
though,
generally
for-
understanding how the housing element process is being conceived of would be helpful.
and maybe Rhonda will share some of that in staff announcements as well. What I was going to ask is about, I was just going to sort of going back to commissioner updates, I guess. The city council is about to start reviewing budget priorities. And since we're down to the last $5,000 in that fund, and it's clear that there's more need, that might be something that we as individuals could opine on with our city council members. I mean, it's valuable information for the city council to know as they're doing their budget planning, that the fund is much needed and is almost used up. I'll say that. Okay, staff announcements and updates.
Sure, just a couple very quickly. Thank you. Thank you again to Commission Member McPherson for attending tonight. The City Council extended advisory body terms for certain advisory bodies, and including for the Housing Commission. So they extended those that were expired in April through May. They will be, City Council is scheduled tentatively to make appointments later in May for some of the vacancies. So hopefully there'll be some updates and some new members that we'll be introducing next month. And then also just wanted to call to your attention that the Housing Commission made a recommendation to the Gray Star Menlo Uptown project when it came through to look at and consider some BMR affordability mixes as opposed to all low income. Because it's an SB 330 project, it has a limited number of public hearings. So unfortunately, it can't come back to the Housing Commission, but the next stop on its path is the Planning Commission. So just wanted to let you know that they did provide several different scenarios that we looked at, similar to what you looked at tonight. It was a similar process. And we looked at the best option of their 3 scenarios, and those will be moving forward to the Planning Commission. So if you are interested in seeing those, providing comment as individuals on that, either in writing prior to the meeting or at the meeting, I would just wanted to remind you that that's possible to do so. And that's it.
Do you know what date? Do you know what date it'll be going to?
Don't know the specific date. Mike can probably confirm, but it was it May 20. You mean for the planning commission? Is that May 25th,
Yeah.
Mike? Do you know?
I don't know offhand, but I was just navigating to the. I know they just posted a recent agenda. I don't know that it's the most recent one, so it would probably be. I don't think it's on May 10th, so it would most likely be the one after that.
Okay.
So I believe it's 2 weeks after that. But what we can do is follow up and send out an email, just an informational email with the actual date.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
That's it. Do you have any updates on the housing element?
The only update I have is that I am aware that the consultant was selected, and they're entering into contract with the consultant that will assist with the housing element process. And I believe the city council approved the formation of a committee to help work on the marketing and outreach process. That's all that I have at this point. Most of those updates and information is going directly to city council. So.
Okay. And do we know the role of the Housing Commission in the housing element?
I don't think it's been clearly established. I don't think roles, responsibilities have been clearly established yet. So I think there's more information to come. And to Commissioner Merriman's point, asking for maybe a process update to be provided to the Housing Commission at a upcoming meeting. I'll ask for that and see if we can get an update at an upcoming meeting.
Okay, great. All right. Then do I have a motion to adjourn this long meeting? Lauren moves. And I will second because I'm so excited. All right, that's it then. We are.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was a really rich meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy.